And I want to ask you, with the 300,000 people not in Australia that would normally be here, one of the complaints I've always had with Treasury officials is the way they use immigration to artificially inflate the growth numbers in this country, that the growth per person isn't anywhere near as positive and as strong as growth numbers are in overall terms because of our rate of immigration. Could we think that out of this coronavirus crisis, we're going to have some rational thinking about how many people in Australia we want at any given time and not use it as a way to cook the books?
Hear, hear. If you listen very carefully to what the Prime Minister said today, it's going to be a very different place, Australia, when we get to the other end of the coronavirus. And he spoke about growth. He spoke about incentivising business because he believes that's the engine room for the economy. And the same applies to what we've discovered about the lack of tourists, about the lack of, these temporary visa holders and also students. 300,000, possibly another 300,000 to leave before the end of the year. So what we've done in the past is simply counted warm bodies, Peter. What we've got to do is say, how do we grow as a nation and how do we grow with the help of those people who come from foreign lands into our country? So we've got to rewrite the rules and start being very discerning about who comes into the country. This is our big opportunity. We should be marrying these major changes in population with what the Prime Minister said today about having to grow the economy.
Look, and I have no issue with skilled migration, provided the person coming in is paid a fair wage. They're not undercutting Australian worker wages, but it's a job that genuinely no Australian has been able to take appropriately. What I have a real concern in is the way in which education is a backdoor path to migration. And also a lot of people can come in here with a lot of money, put it in a bank account and basically buy themselves one of those high-income investor visas, and this is where our country really, at all levels, is for sale. And these are things I think that will have to be looked at coming out of this crisis. I want to go, this is in part related to China as well. A lot of push, the media reports today say at least, backbenchers, indeed even Labor MPs, for the government to follow the lead of Donald Trump and get really serious about how we interact with the World Health Organisation.
Well, we don't need to go as far as Donald has done, and I don't think Scott Morrison's got any inclination to follow that route. But what we should be doing is, hang on, give us a review or give us a resetting of the rules of engagement by the World Health Organisation, because you have led us up the garden path in so many ways, giving the world lectures about how we should consider where the virus came from and what verbiage we should use. Things like, oh, you can't close your borders. Don't close your borders. Make sure you doctors don't tell world leaders to close their borders. Oh, what is this? What is this place? They have wonderful data in terms of health and medicine around the world. Let's use that data, but let's keep it to that. I think we've heard far too much from the World Health Organisation. They have bungled their role in this pandemic, and until they get their house in order, why should we give them a single cent?
Look, I'm with you. I had the statistics last night and I verified them again now, and I think I'll have a table that will go up on the screen. But in terms of our contribution vis-a-vis what China pay, $67 million is what Australian taxpayers have put into the World Health Organisation. China, 85 million, us 67, China 85. Now, given our population is 25 million and theirs is 1.4 billion, our GDP is 1.3 trillion, theirs is 14 trillion. There's not a lot of equity there, not a lot of equity at all, and I'll talk to Corey Bernardi about that in just a moment. I'm interested in polling out today too. A lot of Australians are saying they're confused about what they can and can't do when they leave the door.
Yeah, probably because we've got a set of regulations that operate in New South Wales. We've got a stricter set of regulations that operate in Victoria. We've got a more open set of regulations that operate in South Australia. And it doesn't take much to start reading about what the rules and regulations are in other places, like we're a fairly transient kind of population in this country. And that's where we get confused. But you know what? What I thought was very interesting today is don't be confused about social distancing, because by the sound of it, it looks as if the Prime Minister wants to keep social distancing in place until we get a vaccine for this virus. Now, we've been trying to get a vaccine for HIV for almost 40 years. Don't tell me we've got a, social distance for 40 more years, an entire generation? Now, that was a little bit of a worry. So if you're confused about self-isolation and the various rules between states and territories, you better get used to social distancing by the sound of the Prime Minister today.
Another thing I found very interesting driving around, the price of fuel has fallen. Now, interestingly, when no one's driving their cars much, and these blokes are petrol stations, petrol companies in particular, are out trying to drum up business, fuel's down at, 18-year lows, right? Lowest prices underneath 90 cents in some suburbs. And we're always told, aren't we, when it gets jacked up going into a long weekend, oh, it's nothing to do with the timing demand, it's all about the oil price.
Rubbish.
Funny, isn't it? Isn't it?
It is just a con.
When are we going to do something about it?
All of these ACCCs and all of these, weak as water kind of corporate bodies have promised us so much when it comes to all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes between the great oil companies, and of course they'll deny that. But it has been going on. It's about supply and demand. It's never been anything about the barrel price in Singapore or all the garbage that we're fed by some of the motoring organisations. It's all about supply and demand. So right now, they're doing it tough, the Paul Petals. So down goes the price and we can get petrol for 94 cents. The problem is we've got nowhere to drive to.
Palaszczuk government for the fourth consecutive quarter rated the worst government in the nation. This is a damning ANZ, Property Council of Australia survey. I guess she's got to be upset that the Malcolm Turnbull government's still not in play. That might have saved her, but not good for Anastasia Palaszczuk as she heads into an October election. Yeah,
well, you had the Jackie Trad fees and price hikes when it comes to property, and that's been going on for about the last 5 years as Queensland started to rack up the debt. But at one stage, South East Queensland was the big driver of the Queensland economy, and so much was, promised in terms of how the Gold Coast would end up and the fact that the Gold Coast would meet Brisbane and vice versa. Well, things are not doing too well nationally. They're not doing as well in Queensland as they would want to. But the only thing certain is, forget about making money through property by the sound of it. If you're in Queensland, you're safe as houses if you join the public service.
Now, look, just before we go, I'm going to leave my comments until I actually look at what he has to say more than what's been in the papers today. But you've been in the media a long time. You're a Sydney man, and that was his home turf. Was there anything that surprised you in the revelations today from Malcolm Turnbull?
No, it was nasty as we expected. Stuff about Rudd. Most of that was probably a given. That wasn't surprising. We knew he'd get stuck in the Matthias Cormann because that was the thing that tipped the beans out of the bowl. I was a bit surprised about what he revealed about Scott Morrison. I got the feeling they were a little bit more closer than what was said today. And the rubbish about putting Scott Morrison down from private conversations he may have had with others, I thought that was down and dirty. But he's obviously got, he's suffering from publicity deprivation at the moment, Peter. So what do you expect?
Well, apparently even Julie Bishop gets a go-over, so I don't think anybody is spared, perhaps, other than the bloke in the mirror himself. We'll see. We'll see. It'll be all very interesting. Thank you very much, Chris Smith.
Thanks, Peter.